Welcome to the Queer Witch Project, your resource for all things queer and witchy. I am Damona Peacock, a fabulous non-binary neurospicy ordained weirdo queerdo with a fascination for all things symbolism, cycles, and patterns.
And I am Moon Kitty, a queer femme, poly kitchen witch, and a proud geek. Today's topic is queer numerology. And Damona,
Yay!
I know you are so excited about this topic because this is 100% your forte. This is your everything. You are focused on this. I'm so excited for this. I've been waiting for this discussion for a long time.
It's the language. It's one of the language my brain's likes, which is so funny because I
Mm-hmm.
really wasn't like a math whiz in school. I struggled a bit. But again, it's the cycles and patterns part of
Mm-hmm.
it that I have
Right.
a fascination for, and that's all numerology is about is cycles and patterns.
And the way you describe it gets everyone interested in it. Because I had heard a little bit, again, as a baby witch over the years. You saw little things about numerology and numbers here and there, and it sounded fascinating until I met you and you started diving into it. And it's like now, since I know a little bit of the numbers and the how
Mhm,
everything works, I see those numbers and those patterns in everything, in tarot, in
mhm,
life, in everything else. So it's
yes.
really fun to know a little bit about what the basics behind everything is and see how it relates. Because, like I said, I know you're going to go over to some really cool exercises, but it's so fun watching you ask someone, "Hey, what's your birth date?" or something like that, and suddenly you spiel and you give them their life story, and they're like, "I met you 5 minutes ago. How did you do that?" So
It's
I'm
kind of
so
a
excited about this for everyone to pay attention and listen.
it's a little bit of like astrology. It's like a know
Hmm.
thyself sort of thing. And like, oh, this says that this might be a pattern in your life, and then people are like, oh, that's all too real, and I'm like, it's not, it's not stalking, it's just numerology.
Right? And the thing is, like everything else, it's unique to the person, just like your astrological chart. No two cancers are going to be exactly alike, even if they're
Hmm.
born on the same time. There's so many different other aspects and things that come into it. It's like I
Hmm.
said, just an aspect. It's a different way of looking at things, and
Hmm.
it enhances rather than being the only thing. It's the seasoning.
My favorite thing about astrology and things like astrology and numerology
Hmm.
um is the idea that our especially in our culture, it doesn't benefit capitalism for people to be raised confident in who they are and
Mm-mm.
loving who they are. It benefits capitalism for people to be insecure and to always want to be improving themselves and to think that they're in some way broken and in some way needs to be improved, and that you're buying products to always improve yourself. But the thing about astrology and numerology is trying to take a look at you on a soul lesson level and maybe a life purpose
Hmm.
level, and saying, you are who you are what you were meant to be. There is nothing wrong with you. There's stuff wrong with society that makes you feel the way you do about it, but you're allowed to like these things about yourself. You're allowed to be honest about these things that you don't like about yourself, but hey, it is what it is.
Hmm.
And I think it's like it offers a path to that sort of know thyself and
Hmm.
real, like, oh, this does resonate with me, or it doesn't. And I
Hmm.
always tell people, if it doesn't resonate with you, then it doesn't resonate with you, and
Hmm.
you don't have to own that. But if
Right.
it does, maybe it piques you into something about yourself that's worth being
Hmm.
loved and just allowed to be.
I love that. I love that. So, in the interest of knocking or getting us started here, what is numerology?
Cool. Yeah, very basic. I mean, I
I know.
could give, yeah. I'm gonna
What
give the
is?
basic. Let's start with, there are rabbit holes upon rabbit holes upon wormholes in numerology, as it's with
Mhm.
tarot and astrology and all that. So we're gonna go stay very basic. But if I intrigue you, I suggest just go dive in. Go dive
Mhm.
into somebody's rabbit hole, somebody's numerological rabbit hole. Right off the bat, with I don't always, but if I okay, I don't usually need to look it up information for myself, but because I have a pretty good relationship with these archetypes. But if I'm sending somebody and I'm being lazy and I'm like, hey, go go look up Life Path 8 for
Mhm.
me. And I don't want to just tell them. I'll send them a link. And the person that and I don't know this person in real life. I don't know anything about them, but I just like their website for numerology stuff. But I always search term their name, Felicia Bender,
Okay.
and whatever number, life path number I'm looking for, number 3 or whatever. And I'll just send people links from her website. So I'll
Okay.
leave like a link to something of hers, of theirs, or whatever, because it's the one that I tend to like how they broke things down.
Okay.
So like if you do like the sound of numerology, I highly recommend going down some rabbit holes on
Mhm.
Google. So what is numerology? It's the idea that numbers are vibrations,
Okay.
representative of energy vibrations. And these energy vibrations have patterns and personalities and archetypes that kind of express, their lessons, their
Mhm.
messages. And numerology is kind of like, listening to those messages, getting to know those personalities, and finding out what they can tell you about yourself
Okay.
and about the world around you. So with symbolic language, a lot of it's about how much you're paying attention. And if you're seeing patterns, if you're seeing numbers popping up a lot, you can see numbers will talk to some people. They talk to me.
Mhm.
And some people have a weird relationship with numbers. So everybody has a favorite number.
Mhm.
And it's really really fun when somebody tells me what their favorite number is, and then we do something in their numerology chart. And then I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, just like your favorite number. And maybe there's a reason it's your favorite number and you didn't even realize. It's just raising that level of consciousness a
Mhm.
little bit. And again, feel like you're tapping into certain threads of spirit, certain ideas of archetypes of spirit,
Mhm.
um, by getting to know each vibrational message of the numbers. And it's really simple because it's just numbers 1 through 9.
Okay. So you say numbers are all around to us. Where do we get the numbers when we're looking,
Oh,
say for us, if we're doing a numerology chart? Where do we do that? How do the numbers attach to us?
you are going to keep me on track on this
Yes, I
topic.
am.
I really appreciate that. So from the moment we're born, we have
Mhm.
numbers that attach to us, like our birth date or time of birth. So automatically we've got some kind of number sticking to our lifetime, our life point.
Okay.
And not everybody gets that, but most people jot down, or celebrate birthdays. And so for example, in numerology, if you take all the numbers in your whole birthday and you add them up and then simplify that, any double digit number you get, you can simplify it to its base numerological component, by adding the multiple digits together until you get down to one digit. So for example, give me a multi-digit.
4,321.
Well, I didn't have to make it that hard, but four,
Sorry.
three,
It's the first
two.
number that popped in my
Okay.
head.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Four, three, two,
Actually,
one.
it's funny that you say that, because right off the bat, I already know the answer to this one. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, that I see that timestamp, like, again, where numbers talk to me. Also,
Uh-huh.
in the time of day, I get messages all the time when I'm constantly, right now, I'm constantly seeing 111 as 111 or 1111. But 1, 2, 3, 4 is one that also pops up a lot, and I know for a fact that just goes down to a 1, but you add them up, you get a 10, and then 1 plus 0 is 1.
Okay, now
Um,
fun. I'm sorry. Side note in here that's really funny is I see 12, 1, 2, 3, 4 a lot. I totally did not even consciously realize when I said 4,321 that it was 4,321. Until you said that. I totally did not even reason that was the number that popped into my head.
but spirits do it, and that the numbers. Can I just
Mhm.
tell a really funny, I love this story, a little anecdote
Absolutely.
about, okay, so this is one of my favorite stories. I was going to visit a friend's apartment for the first time, and I was following them to their apartment. But I told them, I think we were at the park and then we were going to the apartment. I said, I need to stop and get gas on the way. So they lead me to the gas station and I pump gas and I get a price, 4 digits,
Hmm.
some some dollars and some change, and I can't remember what the price was, but I do remember that I did the numerology add up and then reduced down thing, and it reduced down to 13, which is a notable number for witchy people. You know, it's a special number. So I was like, in my brain, the price of gas for that trip was 13. And I go, wouldn't that be funny if they live in apartment number 13? Mind you, I've never been to their apartment before, and I hadn't yet, since I was following them, I didn't ask for an address. So I didn't know where I was going. I was just following them. So I just had that thought, let it fleet, you know, whatever. And then we go from the gas station to the apartment, and then I'm walking behind them to their door, and it says 13, and I go,
Yes.
yeah. So these are the little ways in which I feel like numbers have personalities and they play with us, and if you're paying
Yes.
attention to them, sometimes they'll send you messages, and I just like built a relationship with all the personalities of them.
Oh, that is awesome. What is like the personality of each number then?
When I started teaching introductions to numerology, I wrote a visualization exercise
Okay.
that kind of runs people through so that you could kind of have an introduction. So I'd love to share, you know, a slightly edited down, hopefully not too long version of that with you if you'd
Sure.
like. Okay.
Absolutely.
And of course I wrote it. So I'm going to open my notes and try to podcast things and read at the same time. We will see how I do. So this is a numerology visualization exercise.
Okay.
And during this visualization, it may help to begin by using your mind's eye and picturing each number as it's written, or how it would be represented in dots on dice or dominoes, or even as a geometric shape that would represent each number's value. Either way you choose to picture them in your mind's eye, try to visualize each number's physical representations as you learn their different characteristics, associations, and messages. 0. Clear your mind. We begin our journey before the beginning at the vibration of 0, representing nothingness and the void. We never count with this number, and indeed some ancient cultures do not use it at all, lacking even the concept of 0, ironically. Picture the 0 as it's written, and you can feel its unformed energy pregnant with potential. After all, the 0 is both full and empty at the same time, which is a symbol, which with its symbol being the eternal circle, which is without beginning and without end. That emptiness of the 0 represents a longing for manifestation. Just as many creation myths begin with a great cosmic void, 0 represents the unlimited potential of a vast creative energy. In the same way, a tiny seed can eventually become a giant tree. This vibration is the primordial potential of the multiverse. For our own personal paths, 0 represents our divine potential and serves as a portal to higher consciousness.
Okay.
So that's 0.
0, again, makes sense. Coming from nothing, that starting point of things ready to go and ready to become into something else.
Now, pagan spirituality wise, I always think of the dark goddess and her cauldron.
Okay. Yeah.
Or the abyss. You know, different archetypes that kind of would fit into 0. What came before anything was. So
primordial ooze.
Exactly. You're picking up what I'm putting down. You're getting the vibe. Okay, so now we'll move on to the vibe of 1.
Okay.
Moving along to the true start of our journey, we meet the symbol and vibration of the number 1. 1 is the first number when used for counting, and it represents beginnings, the start of something new. With 0 as the seed, which represents all potential ready to manifest under the right conditions, the vibration of 1 represents the seed taking root. 1 is the uniting vibration, being everything and all there is represented as a whole. Picture in your mind's eye this number's symbol as it is written, a simple line or tally. Some will see its masculine representation here. 1 is a point with a location but no dimension, called the monad. It represents godhood, the beginning or cause of all things, the primordial force of creation. This vibration harnesses the masculine life force energy of action. One expresses identity, uniqueness, sovereignty, and wholeness. It implies initiative, intent, reason, leadership, independence, and unchangeableness. It also indicates unity, as in the phrase, all for one and one for all. But one is the proverbial loneliest number, so it also stands for the self and the ego. One teaches us that we are whole and to embrace that which unites us.
Hmm. Okay, makes sense. You go from primordial ooze to the beginning,
The spark of life.
the spark of life, the seed that's kind of growing. And when you said number one, I see the seed and I see the roots coming down. And have you seen the ones with the curlicues up and the base?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So I think of the base of that, the one being those roots that kind of sink into the ground with the seed being there, and then the top little portion of that curve kind of coming out and becoming that growth towards the surface of the soil.
And I don't even know like what mythology specifically to tie this back to, but that thought that, God so wanted to look at itself that, you know, we all exist because, that source or that godhood, that energy is wanting to understand itself. And
Mm-hmm.
so we're all a reflection of God in its multitude of phases. That's what I feel is the transition between one and two. Is
Okay.
one was lonely and wanted to understand itself better, and so two, so it morphs and the two comes into existence, and we move on to two.
Okay.
And so where zero can be very obviously kind of gender neutral,
Mm-hmm.
but I also kind of sometimes see it as, again, pregnant with potential, so kind of femme,
Mm-hmm.
but like dark femme. One can be a very masculine energy,
Mm-hmm.
and two can be a very feminine,
Okay.
have very feminine traits. So, if one is the cosmic force of all life, then the number two is the container which receives and gathers that life force. Two is feminine, nurturing, receptive, and intuitive.
Mm-hmm.
Take a moment to write this number symbol in your mind's eye, appreciating how the curve sits upon a sturdy base. This vibration is the number of the goddess. In the two vibration we experience for the first time, duality, such as even and odd, masculine and feminine, me and that which is other than me, light and dark, active and passive, life and death, youth and age, hot and cold, in and out, above and below. You get it.
Mm-hmm.
Two teams or armies can come into conflict, which leads us to another understanding of this number. But you can see as you visualize the scale, two can represent balance as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thus, this vibration may signify the resolution of conflict. The duality of two implies balance, choice, and decision. It is the illusion of separateness, but offers the possibility of relationship. Two consists of 2 points from which a line is derived, and thus the principle of extension. It is divinity mirrored in the face of another. The two vibration teaches us about how we relate to the world around us, and it encourages balance.
Okay. Interesting. I like it. And seeing the two, the number two, as you're kind of drawing it, and you talked about one being the force, and again, without getting too graphic or anything else, it being masculine energy, and two being the cup. If you turned a two on its side,
You have a cauldron.
you have a cup or a cauldron with a handle. So it's that receiving. I understand. You can
Mm-hmm.
see it as that kind of receiving the divine energy and becoming something else, becoming something new, becoming that kind of dual aspect of it.
Yeah, and that concept of like, I see the divinity in you
Mm-hmm.
as you see the divinity in me. Um, that's a very two type of vibe. Like how we relate to one another lives in the realm of the two.
Okay.
So relationships. Yeah. Um, and so we move on to the three.
Mm-hmm.
In an effort to bring the two's duality back into wholeness, one and two are combined. The god and the goddess unite. However, when two things are joined together, their union creates something entirely new, a third entity. For example, two people may come together to form a relationship or a partnership, or even a child if the union is schmegdual. Similarly, when we mix two colors, we will get a new color. Consequently, 3 represents creation, integration, and reproduction. 3 points create a triangle and define a plane. As the first tangible form, it is the first real number and thus a symbol of reality. It represents multiplicity, the many. In it, we find all of the trinities, the 3 faces of the goddess, the 3 phases of the moon's illumination, the Christian Trinity, the primary colors, mind, body, spirit. 3s suggest mediation and integration in that unity and diversity are restored to harmony. If we integrate our intention with action, we make progress, which implies that this number also can be about growth and expansion. 3 is considered the number of creativity, a vibration through which spirit expresses and manifests itself. 3 teaches us that when opposites come together, something entirely new is created, and it is the 3's vibration which allows us to harness and express that divine power of creation. Are you already kind of seeing how this also follows along the major arcana of the tarot?
Yes.
The Fool, you get the Magician, you've got the High Priestess, and now we're at the Empress.
Yes.
So
makes
which came first, the chicken or the egg at this point, you know? I think that there I think I would assume that a lot of the, you know, theories of numerology that can date back to, I hope I get this one right, but I want to say Pythagoras. Probably influenced a lot of the way tarot archetypes were developed. I would assume.
Makes sense to me.
It makes sense to me too. So all right, so yeah, so the 3 is very like creation. So if 1 is that spark of life, 2 is the container of life, 3 is what they make. So that's creation.
Got it. Okay.
Creativity. Self-expression is also another big, like, people who have 3 life paths are very good in some kind of artistic expression.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, so we're on this, if we're speaking on gender terms, we're kind of starting out neutral, and then we've encountered something masculine and a couple of feminines. So number 4 in tarot, like, it's expressed as the, you know, emperor. We're coming back into a masculine energy.
Okay.
Or you know, perceived as masculine. 4 adds depth and so forms the first solid, the tetrahedron, representing perfect order and permanence. It is associated with the creation of the physical world and material existence. When we think about what we have 4 of, the following examples come to mind: the 4 elements, directions, seasons, weeks in the lunar cycle, walls of a typical room, and legs on a table or chair. This implies that 4 is the number of structure, stability, and boundaries. Since these qualities also allow us to consolidate the growth indicated by the number 3, 4 can relate to rest, recuperation, and consolidation as well. The 4 vibration is a firm foundation and represents justice because it is the product of equals, 2 plus 2. 4 tells us that focused work and foundation building are essential aspects of our divine path. That's 4.
Makes sense. If you're good, if you are creative, if the energy comes from the creative, from the 3, it makes sense that the energy needs a direction.
Yeah, you have
and
to
needs a
put that
direction to
creative,
go.
got to put that creative energy into some kind of container,
Mm-hmm.
which is a pattern that we see in 1 and 2
Mm-hmm.
and from 3 to 4. So again, patterns and cycles. It's so
So
good.
exciting and
I like it
interesting.
so much. Okay. So then we move into 5, an
Mm-hmm.
inherent risk in the structure and stability symbolized by the number 4 is getting hidebound, stodgy, or stuck in a rut.
Mm-hmm.
Thus, 5 represents the change and conflict that can disrupt that complacency or that is necessary in order to grow beyond it. If 4 is our firm structures, 5 is the thirst of freedom that busts apart any unnecessary structures which happen to be stifling our growth. In tarot's minor arcana, 5s can point out crisis and strife and struggle. 5 is representing those times in our life that we are defined by the challenges we face and how we meet and overcome them or succumb to them, whichever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
The number 5, therefore, represents difficult experiences and the learning opportunities they bring us. 5 is the number that represents humanity, in that there are traditionally 5 fingers on a hand, 5 extensions of the body, arms, legs, head, and 5 senses. 5 is the pentagram. It represents travel, motion, time, and therefore change and alteration. Ironically, since the 5th element is that of spirit, that which unites and transcends the elements, 5 is also a number associated with our soul. Consequently, 5's vibration represents the soulful work that is possible through our physical manifestation, bringing vibrations of health, vitality, and new possibilities.
Interesting. And it makes sense. And here's my thing, because the 5 card is the Hierophant.
Mm.
And it's talking about the idea of breaking free and breaking through. I know, again, you have a very different relationship with the Hierophant than I do. To you, it seems to be more restrictive, but for me, it is that breaking free and breaking out of those traditions, and that standing point. It is the adventure of learning, where is your soul going? What is your soul
Mm-hmm.
going to do? How can you explore that and take those decisions that you've made and learn from them and progress on your journey and growth?
I think there was a huge disservice done when they originally associated the Pope or that kind of Christian
Mm-hmm.
iconography to the
Yes.
Hierophant, because I think that's the symbology that is I'm not behind it. I've seen
Mm-hmm.
way better expressions of the Hierophant,
Mm-hmm.
like trees, and
Yeah.
ancestries and roots and traditions. But yeah, so here's my favorite personification of the 5 energy. And it's possible not all of our listeners will quite understand this reference, but I'm pretty sure you can search for it on YouTube. But do you remember the Kool-Aid Man commercials from
Yes.
like the 80s
Hmm.
and the 90s? And he would bust through a wall and he'd be like, oh yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. That's the number vibration of the 5. Like, if you're gonna move or travel, the 5 energy is very, and 1 is a very like spiritual, very heavy and like spiritual connotation numbers, and so is the 9. And the
Hmm.
5 is like that perfect like halfway point that's like more humanitarian
Hmm.
and embodied. So, because we start off in spirit and then we become more into our bodies. And once we've done that, we will also try to transcend.
Hmm.
So, again, it's like a pattern and cycle. You see that again in the major arcana. And you know that in the major arcana of tarot, 9 isn't the end of the cycle,
Right.
it keeps going.
Hmm.
But you'll also see that like if you that the 2 is related to the 11
Hmm.
and the 3 is related to the 12. So yeah, it's very, again, the rabbit hole always goes deeper.
Yes.
We were on 5,
So
so
6.
6. Um, 5 is also, yeah, well, we'll get into the queer archetypes of 5.
Hmm.
Because I think I started to really think about gender expressions and the
Mhm.
numerology archetypes when I was trying to think, but we'll get to that later. 6, after the disruption represented by the number 5, a new balance is needed. Thus, 6 indicates the choices we make as we search for such a readjustment. These choices are not the simple this or that type indicated by the number 2, however. Rather, they are the difficult ones necessary to resolve the strife of the number 5. 6 represents emerging consciousness and purification. As a hexagram, it consists of 2 opposing triangles, symbolizing fire and water, and bringing an integrated awareness of both spirit and matter, thus promoting reconciliation. The readjustments 6 brings into manifestation are often the result of establishing reciprocal relationships with our environment or with the people around us. We also gain a sense of appreciation, peace, and harmony when the new equilibrium has been struck. 6 is the number of family and marriage, ancestral knowledge passed down through the generations, a nurturing, receptive, balancing vibration of love. After all of the changes and travel represented in 5, the 6th vibration is here to welcome you home. This is where we find healing from any trauma experienced in crisis brought on by the 5.
Okay.
So very family oriented, healing oriented. And there are
Recovery.
some very interesting, how we were talking about the relationship between 1 and 2
Mhm.
and 3 and 4. Well, 3 and 6 and 9 all kind of also have their own relationships, as does
Mhm.
4 and 8.
Mhm.
So it's just,
Interesting.
yeah, patterns and cycles. What can I say? It's my thing. Okay, I get all excited. Shall we move on to 7? I'm trying to
Yes.
get to the end here.
Yes, we've got a lot more to go.
Yep, sorry. However, the number 6 is still far from the completion of the numerical cycle. The eternal ebb and flow of life shows up next in the tests and the challenge us to prove what we have learned through the chaos represented by the number 5 and the effort to resolve and rebalance that chaos as seen in the number 6. While the challenges of the number 5 may be called the homework assignments of life, the number 7 represents life's midterms and final exams. They are the tests wherein we either prove our level of mastery and thereby attain victory, or we are forced to reassess how far we've come and how far we have yet to go. 7 is the number of distinction because it cannot be created through multiplication. It represents both reason and chance. The 7 vibration is analytical and investigative. It's your science and technology number.
Mhm.
It is found in the 7 musical tones, 7 color rays of a rainbow, 7 planets visible without a telescope, vowels, days of the week, gathering together to separate things into a single whole. 7 is metaphysical, encouraging a spiritual focus for obtaining wisdom. Being the day on which God rested and the sum of the divine trinity plus the fourfold world where soul meets body, 7 is often called the sacred or mystical number, representing initiation or an awakened state. 7 represents perfection, but also everything that can undermine that perfection. It's, to me, this is where numerology in my mind and the tarot kind of diverge, because for me 7 is the hermit number. It's deeply spiritual but on a very personal level.
Yes, but at the same time, when you say that, I get it because what you were saying, 7 is science and technology, but I also know science, it is spirit. And you would think that those would be absolutely diverse things. But to me, when you're looking at the Hermit card, it's about going in and finding internally, but sometimes finding internally also leads to alchemy. It leads to studying and learning what you need to do to progress out. So the fact that it doesn't to me diverge from the idea of 7 being the Hermit.
Yeah, although what I mean by diverge is that traditionally the number 9 in tarot is the hermit. The hermit
Oh,
usually
okay.
falls under number 9. But for
Okay.
me, I see the hermit vibration in the
Okay.
7
Got it. So
because
what is
it's that internal going in. And so the hermit always carries that lantern to share its illumination. I think like Hermes and Mercury kind of fall under the 7 in the
Mhm,
sense that the internet is a 7. The
mhm.
internet itself, this thing that we're
Right.
talking to people on, also falls under the vibration of the 7.
Okay, makes sense.
Science and technology, but also very metaphysical.
I'm trying to remember what the
Um,
seventh card is. Is it Chariot then?
yeah, I think so.
Okay. But
Yeah,
Chariot
so
also
it's
makes sense. It's movement. It's
mhm.
movement towards spirituality. It's movement towards um progression of study going forward. So I can see that too as slightly different. But that's why I was getting this confused. But yeah, I can see them as both.
Right, right. And fun fact, 2023, the year that we're in right now, is a
hmm
7
hmm
year. So it's a chariot year.
Yes. Okay.
So
Progression, moving
fun
forward.
types. Yep, exactly. All right. So 8, almost there. Following the tests and challenges of the number 7, 8 is concerned with regeneration, progress, and moving on with our lives. Another path to understanding this number begins by considering how the pace of a movie generally accelerates dramatically as the climax nears. 8, which is the second to last number in our numerology cycle, represents that acceleration, which leads up to the finale. Hence, this number is about movement, strength, and power, or the need for those things. The 8 vibration often represents success, self mastery, supporting business and finances. As the musical octave, it returns to itself, but at a new level or frequency, and thus denotes all rhythm and cycles.
hmm
That mind's eye, right?
hmm
The number 8. The number 8, as it is written, looks much like an infinity symbol turned 90 degrees, reminding us of the phrase, as above, so below. The 8 vibration represents progress toward completion and the final adjustments that need to be made to achieve it. Remember that what we release into the world is often what is reflected back to us and what we are open to receiving. 8 is often seen as a financially lucky number.
Makes sense. It's smooth. It's flowing in and out of itself.
If 4 is about foundational work and doing the work, 8 is the rewards you can reap from the work that you've put in.
hmm Okay.
Yeah. It's always fun to talk about like their weird connections back to other cycles
hmm
and patterns. And so we come to 9. The 9 brings us to the completion of the numerology cycle. 9 represents endings, the completion of the task or project for better or worse. It is the climax and the finale. The frenetic activity of the number 8 has led to the accomplishment and consequences symbolized by 9. 9, which is 3 cubed, is the perfect form of the perfect 3. It is a circular number because when multiplied, it continually reproduces itself in the sum of its digits. Because of this, and as the last of the root numbers, it represents limits, boundaries, and strength, but also wisdom, transformation, and spiritual consciousness. There are 9 orders of angels and 9 months in human gestation. 9 invokes global awareness and humanitarian compassion. As the completion of the cycle, 9 becomes our launching pad for the rebirthing process.
Hmm. Completion, end of cycles makes sense, but also a 9 is shaped like a 0 and a 1 when it leads
Very,
back into that cycle again.
that's very interesting. Yeah, that's a great observation there. Yeah, I like that. I had never considered that before. Um, 3, 6, and 9 to me are the triple goddess.
hmm
The
Makes
that
sense.
yeah, traditionally. Although I mean, there's a whole ramble to be said about there being a fourth goddess that's not is the unseen goddess of the triple, but
hmm
that's a whole other thing. But since you mentioned that 9 looks like a 1 and a 0, I also wanted to say that 10 What comes after the completion of something? 10 represents the result of that completion. That is an epilogue to it. 10 reduces to the number 1 when we add its digits, and so indicates the beginning of a new cycle, a rebirth. In numerology, whenever 0 works in companionship with the other numbers, 0 becomes a magnifying lens for that particular vibration, ascending the lessons of its companion numbers and intensifying their influence, as in starting a new cycle, but at a new or higher vibrational level. So if you get like a 10 or a 20 or a 30, it's the 3, but like intensified. It's the 2, but like but magnified, you know. So it's like really driving that home. I find a lot of people with 10 life path, with a life path number of 10, so they're like hyper ones.
Right.
Yeah,
That makes sense, because if you, again, once you finish something, there's nothing more to be done, so you have to start something new. Just in the sense
always.
that there's nothing else to do on that one. That is over, it is done, cycle begins again.
Yeah, when I talk a lot about cycles and patterns, I'm not necessarily saying that we're going in circles. A lot of times we're going in spirals, if that makes sense. We will come back around to these lessons, but always at a different level, or, you know, higher consciousness, perhaps, because we've learned from this pattern before. So yeah,
I like it.
so those are the
Spring.
personalities of the
Spring.
numbers. Yes.
All
And
right.
so I know I talk a lot about the life path number, and I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but like your birth date will eventually, you add it up and you can reduce it down, and it'll get you an idea of what your life path number is. And the life path is essentially supposed to be like, if you want to get paid to do what you love, find a job or a career that is in alignment with the vibration of your life path number. It's kind of something what I'll go to help people if they're looking for, like, how can I get paid to do what I love? What career should I be devoting my time to work towards? That sort of stuff.
That makes
Or
absolute
even
sense.
just want to talk about soul purpose.
Yes. No, having a life path of 5, I can totally see that in a lot of ways that influence has been there with the job that I chose, with wanting to break free of a lot of things. I can see those
Your love for
resonant symbols coming through quite often.
your love for travel, your wanderlust. I think it's really kind of funny too when you get to know people. Like, I see the 5 balances really well with your sun sign being a fire sign. I feel like those two feed each other a little bit.
Just a
A
little bit.
Sagittarius with a 5 life. Woof.
Yeah. Yeah, the wonder, the exploration, the endless curiosity. That's the thing. I am and always will be Alice. Whether I'm diving, it doesn't matter what rabbit hole I'm diving down, I want to know why. And yes, I recognize that sometimes we are all mad here, but the curiosity is always there to see what is next, what's happening, where can we go,
Yeah.
what can we do from here. But I know we want to kind of go into with the queer aspect. Before we dive into queer, I know there's a thing called challenge numbers. Do you want to touch on those really quickly before we dive into what is queer about numerology? So now we got the numbers and the vibrations, but how does that relate to being queer? The first challenge.
So the thing about challenge numbers is there are we do a lot of focus on getting everything down to its 1 digit number component, but there are special things about certain kinds of numbers.
Okay.
For example, numbers that repeat themselves: 11, 22, 33, 111, 11, 11, 22, 33, stuff like that. 44, 55. So if a number is repeating itself, that can also be called like an angel number. But it could be a message coming through, and there can be multiple messages. It could be like, you really need to pay attention to the number that is being repeated, like 1111. So pay attention to the vibration of 1, but also how many times it's repeated. Or if it's like 333, I was just saying 369 is, triple goddess. So like, you're getting the god phone's ringing and it's the goddess. You got to answer that, that sort of thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, new beginnings. So so sometimes multiple digit numbers. So, and then there are also these challenge numbers like 13, 14, 16, and 19. They're also, there's other words that the terms that they're called, but I don't like to use those terms. So I'd like to call them challenge numbers. And they kind of speak on like there being maybe past life stuff that you brought in to work on, where you were a certain way and you're learning to not be that way. And so if it's a, like for 13, the root of that is 4, so it's about learning to work hard. But if your challenge is the 13 kind of 4, you could also have the 22 kind of 4, which is a whole other ball game. But if you have the 13 4, you're working through issues around not taking, not, you know, the 3 and the 1, right? So not taking the initiative to speak your truth and to create what you were meant to create in the world. So now you're here to work harder in order to, you know, face the things that you maybe didn't do in a past life. So that's kind of, you know, how some people see challenge numbers. So some challenge numbers can get weird reputations, like 13. I don't see it as a bad thing at all, but I do see that it sometimes brings us, you know, its own special mythologies into the world. So that's a little bit about the challenge numbers. But queer,
yes. So the queering the numerology of those archetypes that you just talked about, or the symbolism of the numbers.
So there is also in numerology, there is this concept that not only do numbers have, you know, a hierarchy and a vibration and an expression of that vibration, but so do letters in an alphabet. So depending on, you know, and I obviously only know the English language, and I don't know a lot of other languages, so I can't say how this would apply to other alphabets or other languages, but at least with learning numerology, being an English speaker, there are a number of vibrations assigned to every letter in the R alphabet, and it just basically depends on where it falls in the alphabet. A is a 1, B is a 2, C is a 3, and so on and so forth. And if it's an 11, it's a 2, and if it's a 13, it's a 4. You know, so a lot of times you'll see the alphabet in 9 rows, and then you have like A through, you know, 9 letters in, and then you have the next row, so that you can kind of see a little chart. And so therefore your name or any word has its own numerical vibration if you're willing to do the math. And there's some interesting things that go along with that. But specifically, if you're doing a full numerology profile for someone, you want their name and their birth date. And then you can do some really fun things with the numbers. And your name will tell you things like a soul number or your, you know, self-expression number. And you have to add all of them together to get, so in traditional numerology, the name on your birth certificate is kind of a big deal because that's the name everybody wants to work with. That's what you were born. That's your destiny, right? Queering the numerology, I perceive the most important name for us to work with being your chosen name. And as a queer person who has family and my closest friends are trans people, I think it's far more important for people to look at the numerology of their chosen name, maybe sometimes their magical names, maybe, you know, the names that they choose to go by, and not necessarily dead naming people by saying like, I have to see what's on your birth certificate before I can do your profile. There's another thing. I have a friend, my bestie, who is a trans non-binary person as well. They and I have worked numerology together. We've taught together, and we've been willing to help trans people who are kind of exploring what they want their chosen name to be or how they want it to be spelled. And we've offered numerological insight to, well, if you spell it this way or you use this name, this is the vibration you would be inviting into your life. This is the
Mm-hmm.
kind of person it's telling you you're trying, you're wanting to be. This is what you're invoking, or this is kind of what's behind the vibration of this name. And we've helped people kind of, I certainly used numerology to help me decide between 3 different possibilities of spelling one of my child's names.
Mm-hmm.
Because I couldn't decide. There was different options.
Mm-hmm.
So queering numerology for me starts with not requiring the birth name as much as really deeply valuing the chosen names that we go by.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also mentioned that I wrote up a list of maybe just kind of brainstorming different queer archetypes, like we
Mm-hmm.
did an episode on queer archetypes, and maybe where they would fit into the numerology cycle, if you wanted
Mm-hmm.
me to like read through.
Yeah, no, I'd love to kind of get that feel. So we know we've gone over what the vibrations of the numbers symbolize. So when we're talking about queer archetypes, I love the idea of breaking them down so how they kind of relate. So, what's number one?
0.
Or
We
sorry,
start
what's
with
zero?
0.
We start with
I know
zero.
I always say 1 through 9, but like
I've
I never ignore 0. I love 0.
okay. So what's zero?
Okay. The baby goth, the goth gays,
Baby witches.
uh, baby witches, baby queers,
Mm-hmm.
the unhatched, the uncracked egg, innocent and full of potential, a
Mm-hmm.
child that's not forced into any gender roles, that are grow up free to explore their self-expression in any way that feels right to them.
Okay.
Number 1, our queer archetypes in number 1, I would say they're the fatherly kind in our community, in a healthy masculinity kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
Community leaders, organizers, campaign candidates, like Harvey Milk comes to
Mm-hmm.
mind. They get the fire started, they keep the fire tended, they accept the passing of the torch. The egg has hatched. Number 1 is coming out,
Mm-hmm.
manifesting the authenticity of being yourself. And drag kings. Number 2 is high femme, low femme, femme for femme. We worship the divine femme kinds of vibes. The U-Haul. They were roommates.
Mm-hmm.
Love is love. So the 2 is, the totally lesbian vibe to me. That's
Mm-hmm.
what I get from the 2. But it's also like in, the freedom to have relationships and form relationships, how
Mm-hmm.
we define
We choose
relationships.
them.
Hence the love is love. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
3 is the artist, the drag queen, the poet, the writer, the actors, crafting and creating gender fluid and freely expressive on and off Broadway musicals.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us gay peeps love our musicals.
Oh, yeah, of course. Now, I find it really interesting that drag kings fall under a 1, but drag queens fall under a 3 rather than a 2.
Yeah,
Because drag is that kind of expression of
it's so
creativity and expression of
creative.
soul,
Yeah.
but it's not necessarily as nurturing as you would think of as femme.
And the drag kings, it's like, really coming into owning that space,
Mm-hmm.
which can be hard for people who are traditionally raised and assigned female at
Mm-hmm.
birth. So it's always like coming into that like ownership of that
Mm-hmm.
leadership of that energy of action. So yeah. But I mean, I could, if I wanted to get into specifics, there are certain drag queens I could think of that would fit
Mm-hmm.
in that high priestess role of the 2.
Yes.
So
Yeah. Again, everything being fluid because you're
totally.
going to have aspects of every kind of bit of these numbers in you
And I
as it
did the
comes down.
best
I
I
just thought that
could
was
with
really
these.
fun as an
It
interesting
is. Yeah. I did the best I
interesting
could with these 2. I'm just like, I would love to hear what other people think, and if
hmm
they have things that I didn't think of,
hmm
so definitely in
Yes,
the
please.
comments. So 4 is like your buff, hardworking handyman. We can fix it. Never backs down from a challenge. Dependable bear and butch vibes.
hmm
And then 5, we have your loud, sexy, boisterous, brick thrower, barrier breaking, change maker, transformative, trans revolutionary, go-go dancers. I mean, they could all be the same person or they could be different people. I don't know.
Right. Breaking stereotypes, breaking expectations, breaking all of those things and
Yes.
making you think it's something different.
The ability to rebel against, what you're taught to be
Hmm.
who you really are.
Right.
6 is the healer, the community builder, the taking younglings under their wing, listening, learning, and passing down the history of the queer ancestors. We must tell their stories. Leather fam, drag fam, blessings of all of our chosen families,
Hmm.
all in the number 6. The 7 is the intellectual, the educated, the librarian, solo poly, analytical, nerdy, collector of fine leather goods, into the metaphysics, and will read you for filth and blame the tarot cards. You know those people.
Yes.
8, successful, hardworking, Midas touch, business-minded, hosts events, gives back to the community, creates a business in service to the community, and creates safe spaces.
Hmm.
The 9 is your spiritual humanists, free spirit in service to community, passing the torch to the next generation of leaders, serving our elders, sisters of perpetual indulgence,
Hmm.
passing down of leather traditions and history, hanky codes, creating accessible classes. What is remembered lives. Act up, fight AIDS, preserving the legacy of those who came before us, who paved the way for us to be who we are today. May we continue their legacy and leave a more accessible and accepting world for the future generations.
Hmm.
And those are my queer archetypes for the
I like it.
numerology.
I like it a
Yay!
lot. I like the way they work. Because again, it's they work. I can't really think of any other way to describe it. It just they resonate in those with those numbers that are in there, but it takes that queer aspect and makes you think of how you can be outside of the norm and still follow in the spirit or the symbolism of the norm, whatever norm is.
Yeah, yeah. And, again, it's, these are lenses,
Hmm.
windows from which we can perceive things, their vibrational energies, their patterns that make sense, their archetypes, their personalities. They
Hmm.
can be spirit guides. And if you start paying attention to numbers, you might start asking yourself, who is trying to get my attention?
Right. Okay, so with all of these things, we've talked about the numbers, how they relate with birth names, with chosen names, with birth dates. I'm assuming significant events, major life things that happen on days will also have a
Oh.
vibrational energy to them too.
Yes,
Um,
you can always add up the current day to find out what its vibration is. And you just through going through this list, it reminded me of of how cool the personal year
mhm,
numbers and cycles are. So adding up your birth date, just a really quick, this is how I do it. I will reduce down a person's month and then the day. So like if they were born in November, it'd be a 2 because it's
mhm,
11 equals 2. And maybe they were born on the 28th. 8, 9, 10, that's a 1. Okay.
mhm,
Down to 10, down to 1. So that would be a 2 and a 1, and then 1978. And then I would add 1 plus 9 plus 7 plus 8, and then reduce it down to one number.
mhm,
And that's how I'll get there. And I'll add those, the month, the one numbered of the month, one number of the day, and the one number of the year that I get. I'll add those 3 together, and there's your life path. So your personal year cycle is another kind of really cool one to look at, where you add the month you were born, the day you were born, with the current year. Like I
mhm,
said earlier, 2023 is a 7 because 2
mhm.
plus 2 plus 3 is a 7. And that's your personal year cycle. And my favorite thing to do with people, and you can hire me, you can pay for my time for an hour or two, and I will sit down with you and we will go through this for funsies.
Mhm,
But it's really fun to learn about people's history of significant events that have happened to them and figure out where that fell in the personal year cycle.
mhm,
Like I'm moving, everything's changing this year. I can't figure out, everything seems to have changed. I thought yesterday or last year I felt so solid in where I was, and now everything's changed. Oh, you must have moved from a 4 personal year to a 5 personal year.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of thing. And it's really fun. People will go back, I say write the last 10 years out and assign their personal years, and then write down anything significant that happened to you in that year that you can just remember off the top of your head.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, I got pregnant for the first time. I was in a 6 personal year,
Mm-hmm.
which is about, you know, uh family. Actually, I got pregnant in a 5 personal year, which is about change and transformation.
Mm-hmm.
The first time I'd ever been pregnant, and the kid was born, I was in a 6 personal year, which is focused on family and healing. Yeah, that was that, and changed my life forever from then on.
Mm-hmm.
I was no longer the person that took care of everybody else's kids. I was the person that took care of my kids.
Right.
And
And
then my second child, sorry to interrupt, but my second child was conceived in a 9 personal year, which is also the same year Raven Moon passed away.
mm-hmm.
And born in a 1 personal year, a life of a completely start of a completely new cycle,
Right.
of which I am now on 7.
Right. And that's what I say. The interesting thing is you and I both are synced in our personal years.
Yes.
And in this 7 personal year of spirituality and diving
Yeah.
deeper into our things, we started a podcast. We're
Right.
literally watching these things unfold as we're in the middle of this personal year. It's like, hey, let's start a podcast on spirituality and queerness, and going from there as we're sitting in this spirituality queerness connection point of our
I
personal
really love that you
years.
put that together, because I had not, but I was just saying that the 7 and the internet are connected, and here we
hmm
are we're both in 7 personal years, and we started a podcast.
Yes.
See, this is what I love about numerology. It never fails to surprise me sometimes about how well it does kind of sometimes add up, pun
And
intended.
exactly. And again, you're talking about different things. And again, I know you and I have gone through, and I've done some numerology work with you. So I know some of my personal years and stuff. But like you mentioned before, you do have numerology services. And this is something that I
Yeah.
would highly, highly recommend. And I probably will go back and dive back in again and dive a little bit deeper in some of the other
Yeah.
aspects of it. But yes, all of the information for how to contact Damona, how to contact her services. It's all linked to the show notes off the main podcast. You can check the link trees, all of those things. But yeah, sit down if you get a chance. And I highly recommend, I cannot recommend this enough. Sit down with that numerology, because like I
Yeah.
said, you will have just these, oh my God, wow, whoa, oh my God,
Yeah, I'll do your
craziness
personal
moments.
years. I'll do your life path number. We can do your whole numerology profile that
hmm
includes your chosen name, or yeah,
Exactly. And
as
it's
long as you're willing to
really
pay
cool.
me for my time and emotional labor, I am more than willing to walk through this with you. Because again, going all the way back to knowing yourself,
hmm
permitting yourself to be who you have always been meant to be, just to
hmm
be who you are, and who you are is what resonates with you.
And having the interesting thing about it is going back and looking at all those things and finding where those personal years are, it does help you anticipate what can happen in the next couple of years, because I see that again with myself, and knowing my partner is on a year cycle behind me. So I
Mm,
see what, and they're not into this woo stuff the way that I am and everything else,
yeah.
but I see them going through things. I'm going, okay, yeah, you're going through the same mental change and progression that I did last year. So I understand exactly what you're going through. I can't tell you any of this, but it
Yeah.
helps me relate to the other people in my life, knowing where they're at in their personal year, because I can take what happens with a grain of salt, or know how to offer guidance or suggestions or support, even if it's just listening support as things are happening.
Yes, I do that all the time too. Sometimes I'll be like, remind me again what personal year you're on, to my friends when they're telling me like what's going on in their life.
hmm
And sometimes it'll surprise me. I'm like, oh wow, for you, this 4 year has really been about finding your foundation in you and nobody else. And it
hmm
can feel very isolating, but that's how your 4 year has manifested.
hmm
Yeah, so it's been kind of weird. I mean,
So,
it can be kind of weird. Like, yeah, I do really enjoy
hmm
looking at things through the lens of the numerology cycle.
hmm Absolutely. other things, you touched on angel numbers. I know that's a big thing that that at least I'm seeing a lot more of
Mm.
on TikTok, on
Mhm.
Instagram, and just in general, is the kind of concept for angel numbers. And again, like you said, from what let me make sure I've got this right. So it's like kind of the repeating numbers or a series of numbers. It may not necessarily be even repeating of the same number, but a series of numbers that you see
Mhm.
over and over and over again, meaning there's a message
Mhm.
behind it. And
Yeah.
I know I've done that before. I just looked, okay, what is the angel number for
Mm.
this? And kind of getting those messages that are out there. Um,
And everybody's going to have like their own
mhm,
interpretation, their different experiences that inform how they perceive an angel message to be. They may not always line up with how I perceive it, but
mhm,
yeah, it is kind of fun to kind of say, well, this is what that number means. What's going on in your life that pertains to?
mhm.
And people kind of be like, oh, well, it could be about this.
Right. An angel in this definition being an entity of a higher spirit on a
Yes.
different plane of existence, not
Not
necessarily
necessarily of
the
any one particular
yeah,
flavor
not
of
not not a not
spirituality.
a Catholic Christian angel deity,
And along those lines,
such.
I see the numbers as spirit
Mhm,
guides, you know, or a language spirit guides are willing to use
mhm.
if that works for you.
Makes sense. If the spirits need a way to connect and connect through, sometimes it can make sense that they can connect through a number. As you said, it's a vibration, a vibrational plane that transcends all the physical plane as well as the astral and the spiritual. They kind of all connect, and I can see that vibration cutting through all of them.
I will also say that learning the numerology cycle and personalities also really helped me solidify my relationship with the minor arcana in tarot,
Mm-hmm.
because between the numerological meaning and the element in which you're working with, whether it's earth, air, fire, or
Mm-hmm.
water, you can kind of remember or perceive what the message is
Mm-hmm.
of that card, like, five of discs. So you
Mm-hmm.
have the change and transformation and upheaval of the five, and in the element of earth, and the five of
Mm-hmm.
discs is often about, I want to say, like, looking at fears around poverty, or
Mm-hmm.
not having enough. So I mean, sometimes it
Exactly.
really does inform me as a tarot reader. Me as a
Mm-hmm.
numerologist will inform me as a tarot reader.
Right. And I do the same thing because again, I've learned a lot from you. And as I in my own tarot practice, I do tend to follow a lot of numerological principles to reading the minor arcana, even more so than I do in the major. Interestingly enough, because I think of again major arcanas, I can see the patterns at work, but to me they're on a bigger, grander scale,
Yes.
whereas that minor arcana is in the day to day, the mundane
Uh-huh.
aspects of it all.
Yes, yes. And yeah, the major arcana kind of has its own like overarching
Hmm.
theme where the numerology does kind of tie in. But in the same way that it ties in with, you can think like all twos, no matter what element in the minor arcana, kind of also fall under the purview of the high priestess.
Mm-hmm.
Or that like the emperor rules the messages of the fours, that sort of thing. So yeah, they can. And again, you also have a 22 card cycle
Hmm.
in the major arcana, which is
Depending on the deck and whether the artist has
right.
added cards.
Yes, exactly.
Artist interpretation, which you appreciate.
Yes. And let 11s, 22s, 33s. My life path number is an 11. So I have the life path messages of both the 2 and the 11, which is kind of a different, maybe more challenging. I don't necessarily want to like hierarchy it by saying higher vibration, but it's a challenging way of perceiving the two being receptive and nurturing, and obviously like me and my like
Hmm.
goddess type femme mothering vibes. But to me, being an 11 life path really speaks to me being a non-binary person and having both the two, the feminine two, and the masculine double ones
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
being, knowing that I have a masculine uh, energy within me, and that I can be fluid between the two or sit in the middle and not have to be defined by gender.
We've talked about so many different aspects of numerology, how it relates to tarot, how it's become queer. Is there anything else that we missed?
I mean, there's always more. And
Right.
we can always do like a numerology, part two.
Hmm.
at some future point. And if anybody has questions about it, wants to know more, wants to us to hyper focus in on a particular aspect of it, let us know what you want to hear.
Hmm.
But yeah, there's always more. But
Okay.
I don't think there's more time.
Fair. That is a fair point. So with that, let's go ahead and finish on up.
Yeah.
So,
I just want to say thank you so much for listening to the Queer Witch Project. And if you liked this episode, give us a like, maybe subscribe, follow us, leave us a comment. We love to see your interactions and your input.
and as always, if there is a topic you want to know more about or an episode topic you'd like to suggest, please contact us at thequeerwitchproject@gmail.com or find us on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram with the handle @queerwitchproject. We upload twice a month. So remember, queerness is a key to magic.
Be yourself and love rebelliously. Bye.
Bye. All right, getting the last little stray baby hairs that just like,
Yeah, I keep getting them like in my lashes, and I'm just like,
I know, it's like it's so annoying. I can't focus. I can't focus if I've got those weird stray hairs, and it's like I would
yay,
never do
sensory
well
stuff.
on TV.
I never do well on TV.